Okay, now that I've got all my decals on, I can start weathering this kit. And the first thing I do to weather it is to put a wash on it. And normally I use enamel paints or oil paints and thinner turpentine to do my washes, but in my quest to stick strictly to acrylics, I'm going to use this black acrylic model color paint and do a wash with this. I'm trying to get away from anything that has odors in it since I do work in the house, and so I want to try this acrylic paint out and see if it will work the way I want it to. Now I've already done the hull, and as you can see, I don't know if you can see, but the turret hasn't been done yet, but the hull has, and it may be just a little too subtle to show up on the video camera, but it does look different. All the black thinned paint settles in all the cracks and around the details and gives a little bit of a darkening to the hull color or the flatter areas. So it does make a difference, and it just helps make the details pop a little bit more by settling around them, so it doesn't look quite so flat. So I've done the hull, and I'm going to do the turret. So basically what I do is I take my little paint tray here, make sure my paint's shaken up well, and I like to, sometimes when I remember, I like to put some foil in the cup so it's easier to clean up. I'll just squirt a couple of drops of that in there, not very much. Have some napkins handy, and then I take an eyedropper and drop some water in there, make a really thin solution of the paint. Use my stirring brush here, and I can kind of tell if it's thin enough on the side there, and I'll add a little bit more water because I like it needs to be really thin, because you just want to highlight stuff, not actually add a layer on the whole thing that obscures the paint. Yeah, that looks a little better. Then I take a wide brush. This is one I've had for who knows how long, but it's a perfect brush for doing a wash. And then just dip into the paint. Maybe try a little bit on the bottom. Make sure it's not too dark, but make sure it's dark enough. And then just liberally wash it over the clear coated surfaces. Of the kit. And I don't know if you can tell very well, but let me see if I can get my light over here and get a little more light going, but it's settling in all the crevices around all the detail and just making it making the detail stand out a little bit more, giving a little bit more contrast between the basic color and the details. And then one thing you got to kind of watch out for. Now I don't know, I've never really had this problem with the oil paints, but it seems to puddle up a little bit on the lower edges, lower in relation to gravity. So it'll kind of puddle up on the bottom, and if you leave it, you'll have this weird looking dark spot, and I don't want that. So I'll just dry my brush off a little bit and then just rake it over again, and it'll take off some of that excess. Some people use rags, but I don't like using rag because it kind of takes too much of the wash off. That side there. Okay, so that's pretty even. Then I'll set that aside to dry. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the wheels and on the drive sprockets and the idlers to make it all uniform. And I also did it on the tracks. This track has been completed. What I did first is I scraped some, I dry brushed some silver right along here, as I did on the wheels, for that contact point where the rust and dirt is worn off from the wheels. Then after I did that and it dried good, then I used a wash on this to get it looking a little, to give it a little bit more depth. So, oops. Just brush some of that on the wheels. And once in a while, if you have a cat, you'll get some cat hair in your paint. Just watch for it. It's easy to remove. Okay, so I'll sop up some of the extra. I don't want too much in there. I don't want to puddle up too bad. Okay, so we got that. Generally, I like to throw down a piece of just plain white paper to protect my cutting mat from getting too much paint and junk all over it. So anyway, you get the idea. The wash just kind of fills in all of the nicks and crannies. To make the details stand out a little bit better. And then, once I start weathering, it's going to make the detail stand out even more. We'll get to that once all this dries. And track, same thing, just liberally brush it on there. Nice thing about it is, it doesn't matter if it's too much, because on stuff like this, because it settles in really well, and then once the weathering goes on, if it's too weird looking, it'll kind of soften it up a little bit. Again, the nice thing is, this is latex, you don't get all that nasty thinner smells and all that kind of stuff, because you got to use quite a bit of thinner to thin it down if you're using oils or enamels. And they make this stuff pre-mixed, but I've never tried it and never really seen the need to try it, since I can make it pretty easily. I may try it someday, but since it's I've already got the stuff, I just make it myself and not worry about having to buy extra bottles of stuff. And this is why I keep napkins around for when I spill my water. Okay, and that's all there is to that. So once this all dries, then I can actually start weathering, getting highlighting going on. So for now, that's it. After this dries up, I'll come back and start doing some weathering. Okay, time for a little bit of weathering. What I'm basically going to do is I'm going to take the base color of the vehicle, which is German gray, and some white to lighten it up a bit. And then what I will do, I mix it in here, and then using this wide brush again, my multi-purpose brush, I'm going to get just very little bit of paint on here and just basically scrub it on to get the highlights and so forth. You can see a little bit in comparison here. See if I can get my light shining a little better. This one has been dry brushed already. Fenders, front. This one hasn't been dry brushed, so you can see this is just the plain gray color, and this is a little bit highlighted. Now, I'm not going to say I'm the best at this, but once the whole thing is done, it'll look a little more together. There's other ways that I'll eventually try to get these kind of effects, but for now this is the one that I've used for a long time, and it's always worked fairly well for me, so I'm sticking with it. And again, I'm trying to keep this pretty simple and not very complicated for the beginner type modelers that are hopefully watching this. So one thing to remember is when lightening the color, use white first. You always bring color to white. One of the things I learned in graphic design back in the day, because if you don't, you'll end up making a whole lot of paint. So take my white, doesn't need very much, so I'm just going to do 2 drops of white, and 1 drop of the Panzer gray. So it's kind of a 2-to-1 ratio. And I'm going to wipe the end of this off because it drives me nuts when my paints are messy. Okay, and I'll use this spiffy, ooh, whoops, wrong brush, my mixing brush. Mix that baby up, and it makes kind of a nice lighter tone of the basic color. Now, Mr. Model Dude from back in the day, Shepard Payne, used to use this method, for lightening his tanks, but man, he was good at it, and he would add a little bit more white and do a number of different passes, so it really brought out the details. And what this basically does is any of these raised portion, it makes those pop a little bit more and just kind of adds some, you know, a little bit of faded, I don't know, it makes it look a little more faded on instead of a brand new paint job. So you just basically get just a little bit on your brush and then pretty much scrub it all off, because you may think you have it all off, but you don't. So test a little bit right here. And if you have some decent weld detail, it'll really make that stand out. Now see, you can already see it's kind of highlighted. Hopefully you can see it's kind of highlighted there. Rub that off. Same thing here. As you can see, it's lightening the base color up, but it's not getting into where the wash is around the edges. So it's giving a little bit of three-dimensionality in it. And this is kind of a simplistic technique, so there's much more. See how, say that is compared to that. Okay, just makes it look a little more, gives a little bit more depth. And there's newer basic versions of doing this called, you know, modulation and all this kind of stuff. I've never tried that yet, and it's a little more, I don't know, it might not be more complicated than this, but it's different and I'm not used to it, so I'm sticking to what I know. But even this really helps a lot in bringing out the detail of the kit. Okay. If you get too much, it's no big deal. Wipe it off and just scrub it in, because, you know, this is a tank after all, and they are not going to be totally uniform in color. Like a brand new vehicle, because, you know, even just being out in the sun and for a little while, it is going to fade this paint on a real vehicle. So that's the reason you do this. Okay, so we got all that. Let's do make up another quick batch here. Oops. Well, it's one drop of this. Put off. Two drops of white. Mix it up real good. And ready to go again. Get some more on there. And just keep going. Let's see. And later on I'll be adding some dust effects to it, which will further tone down any of this that you may think looks kind of heavy whenever you do it yourself. So scrub it on there. You don't have to worry about it being totally uniform, like I said, because tank out in battle and out in the dirt and dust is not going to be uniform in color. All this is toning down the starkness of the. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Okay, dulled it up a little bit and brought out some of these highlights. So that's done. And then I'll be doing the same thing on the wheels, on the drive sprockets, the idlers. So I'll get to that in a little bit, but before I turn this off for this time, I have put the black wash on my other track. So I'll move this out of the way. And I'm using Testors flat steel. Any steel, aluminum, silver color will work. I like this one because it's a little bit darker than the other one, so it's not quite as stark, but it will work. And what I do, same kind of thing, except I use this little tiny brush here I've had forever that I cut off. Some silver, that on there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub this right along the path where the idler rolls, and would wear this down to bare metal. Okay, just scrub it on like that. And there's different methods of doing this. Some people use pencils, graphite from pencils. There's specialized stuff for doing these colors, but I just use this. This is the way I learned to do it a long time ago when I first started getting into kind of detailing this stuff out a little more and just build it right out of the box. And it's worked pretty good. So as you can see, this side hasn't been done, this side has. Just gives it kind of a burnished look, like the idlers have been rolling on there in the wheels. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with this, get this all done. Once all this gets dried, then I can start with a little bit of dust effects.